Hello there and welcome to Jolie's, where you can get some spicy sausage, roasted nuts, and the freshest React content here on YouTube. Now, before we get into today's video, I would like to ask you to please subscribe to this channel. I want to see how quickly we can get to 100 subscribers here at Jolie's. Today, we're going to be watching Dime Store Adventures video predictions of the year 2025, made by people from the year 1925. So, why don't we get through all this jibber jabber and get right into the video? 3, 2, 1, boop.
Way back in 1925, an article appeared in the Roanoke Times about a Spanish oak tree in Accomack, Virginia, that recently had fallen prey to disease and decay. But because the tree was one of only 2 cork oaks in the entire country, a tree surgeon was assigned to clean up the damage, and before long, the historic tree was looking so good that the article surmised it just might hang around for the next 100 years, standing tall till 2025. And if we pop over to the address on Google Maps, then we can see that they were right.
Hell yeah. Good job, people in 1925. Great job, surgeon.
Assuming, of course, that nothing happens to the tree in the next few weeks. Today, we're going to take a look at the year 2025, as predicted by old newspapers and magazines and books. Some of these predictions will be very simple, and some will be a little more complicated. So let's keep things moving and discuss the financial matriarchy that will soon be upon us.
Wow, this could go really red pill really fast. Oh, P.S. I love that you're going with a 4:3 aspect ratio here, buddy. Amazing, though I'm going to have to change up my graphics or leave the black bars on the side for my own graphics.
I found a whole ton of articles in the 1920s and 30s predicting that the vast majority of American wealth will be in the hands of women by the year 2025.
Wow.
The tremendous accumulation of wealth in the hands of women has reached startling figures, they said. Statisticians figure that the wealth of the country will be in feminine hands by the year 2025, because geez, they already own 41% of the individual wealth, right? Like, it's only a matter of time before.
Great. I mean, like, things shifted really fast, I guess. I would say if you were to have gone 25 years prior to that, they would have probably had less than 10% of the wealth. So, I mean, I guess, just from the perspective of the times they are changing, I mean, it could have been a very reactionary viewpoint on how quickly women, kind of were heading towards equilibrium out of the gate.
Or they completely take over. So what exactly was supposed to be the cause of this massive transfer of wealth, right? Well, part of the thinking was that more and more women were getting involved in the workforce and, entering the stock market. But far and away, the biggest driving force behind the impending feminine financial ascendancy was that women are the beneficiaries of 80% of all life insurance policies and 70% of all the estates left behind by men when they die. So the idea was that over time, this effect would just kind of snowball and more money would be left to women. And eventually, in 2025, women will have pyramided a financial oligarchy unparalleled in history. This one article from a newspaper in Atlanta even went so far as to suggest that with no money left over, men would have to return to the old bartering method of commerce,
I mean, maybe they're not completely wrong in facts, but, come on, fellas, am I right? I mean, who really controls the bank at the house, huh? Come on.
Trading cows and empty gin bottles in place of legal tender. All right, this next one isn't really a prediction, but I did learn from an old newspaper article that 2025 will be the first square year since 1936. Which just means that it's the first year since 1936 with a whole number as a square root, because the square root of 1936 is 44 and the square root of 2025 is 45.
Oh, that's just nifty. I mean, 1936 was a pretty big year if you think about it. I think that's the year that the Nazis rose to power in Germany. So, maybe there's something to history rhyming. Let's move on.
Kind of cool, right? Before 1936, the last square year was 1849, which is kind of interesting to think about because obviously right now there's nobody alive who lived in both 1849 and 1936. So as of the upload of this video, there is no one on Earth who lived through 2 square years. But there's a lot of people still around from 1936 who will live to see 2025. So this will be the first time in decades that we will again have some 2-time square year veterans. But we could have had...
Kind of want to do some research and find out what was going on in 1949. I feel like there could probably be proof that there was something, some legislation, some decision made that would have led to the inevitability of the Civil War that was passed in 1949. I just have a sinking suspicion, but I'm not going to do the research, at least not right now.
Or if a couple of scientists from 1925 had been correct in their prediction that the average lifespan would be 150 years by 2025. And of course, technology too.
Maybe the average lifespan of people alive in 2025 could become, I'm not going to say average, but I'm going to say upper limits could head towards 150. But obviously people are not reaching that on average for sure. That's definitely we're not even at the average being 100. That's still quite an achievement I don't want to make personally.
Was expected by some to accelerate way beyond what we have today. Here is a science fiction story from 1922 that envisions a world of personal flying machines and moving sidewalk chairs. And here we got a sketch
Wall-E.
of the 2025 New York skyline that I found in a newspaper from 1925.
Not bad.
Those are personal airplanes flying around up there, projected to replace the automobile. And on the other side of the country, here's Los Angeles in 2025. I like how the planes in this one are still very much in the style of 1925. I guess there's going to be no major air travel innovations in the next century, apparently. And one last little tidbit before we move on from technology. Here is a funny exchange that I found in a couple of old articles. Apparently, in 1925, a British professor predicted that radio waves, or wireless, would run the world by 2025.
Nailed it.
Every single facet of society would be ran on wireless. Transportation, lighting, you name it. And that idea prompted a newspaper in Cincinnati to respond by saying, okay, isn't this taking things just a little bit too far? Why would we want our bodies to be operated by machinery? Pretty soon, we'll be making love via wireless. And
it's pretty much the first thing that's going to happen. I feel like the first things that are going to happen with any new technology is somebody's going to figure out how to run Doom on it, and somebody's going to figure out how to fuck on it.
Where is the fun in that? All right, moving on from tech, here is a very strange magazine article that I can only assume must have been satirical. The crossword puzzle, it says, may at first seem to be an innocent game, but could very easily become a menace if its popularity continues to grow at such an astonishing rate. Because children in 1925 are obsessed with crossword puzzles, right? And that obsession is only growing. So by 2025, I'm thinking that school will be taught via crossword puzzles. And
this is one of those situations where there's a kernel of truth and obviously a lack of foresight. Maybe 2025, this is one of the first modern eras. I think the division between the pre-modern world and the modern world, one of the divisions is the fact that we rapidly change, you know, and like go through waves and cycles. So this person just probably wasn't prepared for the idea that something that is gaining so much popularity is eventually going to hit an apex and also a decline. Which is true of almost everything except for like Minecraft and Fortnite, it seems. But I mean, these things come in waves and cycles, and popular things, you know, dip in popularity and then gain their popularity back, blah, blah, blah. That's its own whole other thing, which is obviously really, you know, tough to get into. I had something else to say to this. Oh yeah, but in some ways, like, isn't there's I mean, I did a lot of puzzles growing up in school. Like, that was a form of assignment and homework, was like word searches and things like that. And a lot of questions on homework assignments are asked in such a way that they would be, you know, considered like a trivia question. So I don't know what it was like before that. Like, how would you test your students? I like, what methods would you use if not like phrasing things in the form of like trivia questions?
Cleopatra and George Washington and William the Conqueror, these great, important, massive historical figures, they'll all be reduced entirely down into snappy little answers to crosswords. And kids, they're going to be out there reading the dictionary and engaging with classical literature solely so that they can improve their crossword games. And they'll be studying geometry so that they can craft their own like complex puzzles out of strange shapes and designs. And great artists of the future will resign themselves only to painting puzzles and famous puzzlers. So we, the people of 1925, must unite to avoid this dismal image of the future. We must stand together and ban the nefarious crossword, because elsewise the meaning of BC will very quickly transform from before Christ to before crosswords. All right, here's another fun one. This magazine writer is...
I think the great reason to watch this video that I'm discovering right now is to remember how incendiary journalists are. You know, like, opinion pieces take things to the nth degree so often. Be careful when you're reading people's opinion pieces. You can see just how ridiculous some of the ones in the past like 10 to 15 years have been. And not to mention before that, it's just, we can most, you know, if you're my age, you can really look back 10 or 15 years and see just how ridiculous those things were. And you don't even have to read anymore. Like, we're talking about like things posted by Vice or Jezebel or what was that other one? Gawker, all those major, you know, news outlets that mostly bartered in opinion and, you know, had like kind of revolutionary ideologies at their core. You know, you could just see, like, I mean, in my opinion, I used to hold the opinion, I think I realized it goes back further than this, but I used to hold the opinion that the manspreading video that I think was released by, I always get confused. There's Gawker and there was one other one that I think just recently shuttered. Anyways, the manspreading video, I earnestly thought that was kind of like the beginning of the end of like the decline of our civilization, and like what ultimately led to like the victory of Trump in 2016, the first time around. And you know what? I would probably still stand behind that. I just think, like I said, it probably goes back a little bit further. That it was just every now and then you get like something that sticks out like a sore thumb versus, you know, the subtle under, brewing underneath, you know, that they talk about. That's kind of always going on. It's hard to track that stuff, but every now and then you get a spike that's just like, you know, manspreading is a problem and men are such, you know, the enemies for it, and they're the worst because they spread their legs in public. And then, you know, that they go on to get Trump elected. And I will hold to that, and whoever made that video should feel personally responsible for the election of Donald Trump in 2016 and thus the election of Donald Trump in 2024. You know, and if you disagree with me, clip me and tell me why I'm wrong.
Worried that people in 2025 are going to look back to 100 years in the past and assume that everybody just loved the sport of golf. So this guy is going to take it upon himself to put in writing that golf is a miserable excuse for exercise, and that there is no more depressing sight than a crowd of spectators watching two great athletes completely waste their potential trying to knock a stationary ball into a tin pot.
I think he took it a little far there. I don't agree that it's depressing to watch people perform golf at the highest level, but I mean, come on, you're just following the footsteps of what's his name, Mark Twain. Mark Twain's, I think, has a famous quote that a game of golf is a great way of ruining a hike or something like that, or a great way of running a good walk. So yeah, I mean, he wasn't alone in this opinion, but that's interesting. Yeah, if you were to make a broad statement about Americans for probably the last 30 years, or probably closer to 50 years at this point, you would just say Americans love football. I don't like football. I think it's a bad game, personally. Straight up, I think it's a bad game, not well designed, and it's brutish and not worth the trouble. And I know there's a lot of people like me, but I'm an American who's living in this era. The past is going to assume that somebody like me loved football. So I get why he was probably raging against it, and he had to fill a newspaper page with words, and so he decided that he'd go after golf that day.
So there you go. I hope that your preconceived notions about the popularity of golf in 1925 were just shattered into pieces. This next
Honestly, I know I would have assumed that people I would have assumed golf was always like kind of like a elitist sport for the most part. It's not easy to play. I mean, like I would more likely assume that, you know, like, I don't know, I just said the same thing about football. You know, we'll see in 40, 50 years. But I think, like, I don't know, I would assume that basketball would be more often perceived as like the great American sport just because of how easy it is to pick up and play.
Next one is another that isn't exactly a prediction, but it just kind of makes me laugh, so I'm going to include it anyway. In 1925, a girls' club at a college in Indiana held a very secretive party that was themed around predictions for the year 2025. There was no boys allowed. It's just this futuristic party for girls only, and they're going to go in there and hang out and party like it's 2025. And I like this one because imagine if those girls were just right on the money. Like 100 years ago, these college students just perfectly predicted 2025, and they're in there like hanging out in the school gym, and they're pretending to take selfies on imaginary cell phones, and they're drinking iced coffee, and they're complimenting each other's drip, and they're talking about how their party is living rent-free in the heads of all the boys, and they just like completely nailed every single prediction. But we'll never know because it was a mysterious, secretive party, and probably none of the attendees are alive today to see if their predictions came true.
What a, you know, I mean, yeah, the odds of 18 or so year old woman in 2025 having lived to 2025 and still being able to communicate and remember that night clearly. But yeah, I do agree. It's like those girls should have written down the experience and put it into a time capsule for us.
Such a shame. Moving along, in 1950, the United States government bought 210 million eggs from American farmers in order to keep the price of eggs kind of stabilized, and then they stowed the eggs away underground to keep them cool, which prompted this journalist from Michigan to wonder how that whole event was going to shake out in the history books. You know, is little Priscilla in 2025 going to be asking why folks in Grandpa's time used to bury all their gold at Fort Knox and keep all their eggs in caves?
No, because we don't care. I mean, like we do the same with cheese. Like, yeah, this just became a common practice. It's almost like not even worth batting an eye about. Maybe we should be batting an eye about it. Maybe we should be asking, what's up with the cheese? Where's all the cheese? Why do we have so much cheese? We have answers to why we have so much cheese.
Next, we got a journalist in 1946 remarking on the huge amount of books that have recently been published about Franklin Roosevelt. Chances are, by 2025, he says, there will be more books about FDR than there will be about Abraham Lincoln. And if we pop open Goodreads real quick, we can see that there are about 2,100 FDR books and 15,000 Lincoln books.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to say, there is one greatest president, and I love FDR, but it's not FDR. It's Abraham Lincoln. He just, it's amazing too, because FDR, had World War II as the backbone of his presidency, and Abraham Lincoln had the Civil War. So, I mean, it's almost a competition at that point. Which war was more popular in America? And I guess the answer is the Civil War.
So, unless we all really get to work in the next few weeks, this prediction just ain't gonna work out. All right, here's a pretty weird one that I found in a yearbook from 1923 for a high school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Actually, the yearbook is from 1951. I don't know why I said 1923.
Okay.
The pages on all the graduating seniors have a sort of like question and answer section. And most of the questions are like the normal stuff you would expect to find in a yearbook, right? Like, what's your favorite food and what's your favorite song? But then the book also asks the seniors how they think they're going to die.
Wow.
And one kid says that he's going to study himself to death.
Okay.
And a girl says that she's going to die via a nervous breakdown.
Well, she was looking to the future.
And David Eller, the aspiring chemist, says that he just might blow himself up in the year 2025. So David, if by some miracle you're still out there, please, please be careful for me over these next few.
He could be. This guy could be. Always keep looking upward. Great. What would that? Okay, we're assuming he's a high school senior, so 18 years old in 1951. So 1951. So 75 minus 1 is 74. Plus 18 is 74, so that would be 80, 92 years old. Could still be with us.
All right, so I got one
Clever
last
kid, though.
big story to share with you. But before we get there, how about we just like rapid fire burn through a whole bunch of shorter predictions? Like here's an article from 1950 about a fashion show that was sort of meant to predict the futuristic styles of the year 2025. And one of the predictions is that people in 2025 might dye their hair in bright shades of green, orange, and purple. So nice job on that one.
Yeah, in fact, if anything, I would say that she was I don't want to say missed the mark, but she was like a few years late on it. If anything, I feel like we're kind of swinging back to more natural hair colors. I could be wrong. I don't like go downtown and clubbing and things like that. So maybe it's just as strong as it always was. But yeah, I mean, if anything, if she had said this about like the year 2015, I think it would have been an even stronger prediction.
Although I can't quite give the same compliment to these spacesuits here. This guy in 1905 thought that the population of Quebec would swell to 320 million people by 2025. This congressman predicted that the entire population of the United States would work for the federal government by 2025.
Well, if it wasn't for the deep state, am I right, brother?
And this next one is for 2026, but I'm going to include it anyway because I think it's funny. By 2026, we will have 5.2 billion people on planet Earth.
I think I know. He's probably going to follow up with the actual number, but it's like 8 billion right now, I think.
And just look at this picture. That's what it's going to be like. People are going to be packed into every corner of every continent.
Looks like
just
a war's about to brew.
overflowing onto boats. Hey, if you embarked on a quest in 1931 to take every single course offered at the University of Florida, then you would not finish until the year 2025. Someone out there is about to have a real hot resume, let me tell you. Hey, by 2025, we might make it to the moon. Yippee! In 1925, it became illegal in the state of Kansas to sell cigarettes, which led this journalist to ask if bootleg coffee and tea might be on the horizon for 2025. In 1947,
People might be bootlegging the what was it, the charged lemonade from Panera in here in a few years, like trying to recreate that recipe to get them real messed up, brother.
recount was undertaken for a judge's election in Chicago, but apparently some people thought that the recount was taking too long. So long, in fact, that the dang thing wouldn't be finished until 2025. I don't know about you, but I am real excited to find out who won. Here we go.
Just going to say, sounds awfully similar to what we went through in the year 2000 with Bush v. Gore. You know, hey, it's just the presidential election. Why is this recount taking so freaking long when the person I want to win is winning, and the only thing the recount could do is make them not win?
A store called Gamble's that decided in 1960 to hold their 100th anniversary sale, despite the fact that the company had only been around for 35 years. But hey, according to them, the store might not even be around by 2025, so why not just hold the sale right now instead? And I think that was a good idea, because as far as I can tell, Gamble's does not exist anymore. This magazine writer predicts that history will smile very kindly upon Leon Trotsky, despite the fact that he is so heavily maligned in 2025. And this journalist says that...
Did he mean 1925? But yeah, if I remember correctly, Trotsky is... Well, Lenin. Lenin's the one that we really smile upon. Trotsky, I still feel like, is a little bit... I don't want to say malign, but complicated, even for like tankies. Like, I feel like they have to defend him. I might be thinking of the wrong person though, but I'm not going to Google it.
Because people in 1925 celebrate the old days of pirates and smugglers, people in 2025 just might craft romantic stories out of the current era of gangsters and bootleggers. That's some pretty good cultural analysis there.
100%. Like, wasn't that what was that show called? I mean, I maybe not but Peaky Blinders was like the British version of that, and I feel like there was a bootlegging show that was pretty popular here in America. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I have a game that I want to make called it's right now called Heist, and yeah, it would definitely be taking inspirations. It wouldn't be straight up set in 2025 America, but it would probably be pulling design aesthetics from like that era of American culture. And, you know, with gunmen, hijackers, things like that.
But all right, I think it's just about time we wrap this up and touch on our final story.
Okay.
A real good one, I think. In 1925, a journalist from Toronto wrote this whole big story about how silly it is that young people are looked upon with such disdain by the older generations.
Okay.
He said
he is about to get into something, and I remind myself to clip this portion. He's about to get into something that I've been trying to express, and I should do an entire hot take video on it. We're seeing the things that they maligned millennials about. Now they're maligning Generation Z about. This isn't about generations. It's about age. That, like, in our relationship to each other as we age and as we're young, in changing stages of life, and the things that every human goes through to some extent. You know, we're saying, like, and people are catching on to this. We're saying Generation Z and Generation Alpha had brain rot to the nth degree because they've been online all day. But then we remember that our favorite shows were brain rot material ultimately, you know, growing up, whether it be early internet meme videos like Badger, 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 Mushroom, Mushroom, or, you know, like actually investigating some of the animated shows that we watch, or at least moments from them. Like, honestly, I don't know. I don't want to sound holier than thou, but it's like, you know, I grew up with SpongeBob and The Simpsons. I didn't spend time with iCarly or That's So Raven or Hannah Montana. I would definitely think, like I said, not to pat myself on the back too hard, but I felt like I went from kids programming to adult programming. And I'm not saying the adult programming is really good, because we're talking like old, you know, 90s sitcoms. Like, you know, yeah, I watched Friends, and you remember that one, but do you remember Caroline in the City? Do you remember Husbands? I don't know. Like, I can't even remember the name of these shows, but a lot of them, what is it? Just Shoot Me. Anyways, so I'm not saying adult comedy sitcoms were that much better, but still, I mean, I think the facsimile of an adult sitcom made for kids, starring kids, to get them prepared to watch adult sitcoms, I don't know. There was something weird about that. Anyways, you know, we're going to the what's being said about the boomers is now it's starting to bleed over into Generation X, and trust me, once millennials take over, we're going to be such a big voting bloc, cultural, you know, not just politically, that we're going to cause the same ire from Generation Z and Alpha, because I think we're almost bigger than both of them combined. So that can't be true, but I mean, they would definitely have to unite to defeat us in the election if we're united. So like demographically, we're going to be maligned just like boomers are. So yeah, that's ultimately what I have to say about that. It's ultimately, it's not that Generation Z has brain rot and can't communicate and has unrealistic expectations. It's that anybody who's been like the age of 18 to 27 has brain rot and is unable to communicate and has unrealistic expectation. God damn, I know I was.
As that the older crowd is constantly accusing the youth of seeking stimulation and excitement.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that old people have been saying that exact same thing basically forever. Like the journalist says that any senior citizen should be able to remember the days of their own youth when their own generation was undoubtedly criticized for being lazy and airheaded and thoughtless and pleasure seekers with no ability to understand money and the economy. You know, like every single generation inevitably gets old and starts levying the exact same accusations against the contemporary youth that they heard themselves. And so it's just completely ridiculous to argue that any crop of young people is somehow objectively worse than all that came before them.
I feel like there's something, I almost have a wise thought, but in a movie or a TV show or a book, whenever an older person talks to a younger person and doesn't dissuade them from following their urges, but helps them focus their urges to something productive, that is considered a kindly, good, wise person. Obi-Wan Kenobi is the ultimate example, and always should be, of what an older person should be to younger people. So yeah, that's just what's crossing my mind right now. If you're my age or somewhere similar and you're watching me right now, please don't malign younger people. Just know that they're full of piss and vinegar and still have a direction that they can go in, and help guide them and help them focus and help them follow their urges and their passions so that they can be in a better place once they do those things. That's what should be learned from this, is like young people need direction. Young people need guidance, you know, not that young people are, you know, stupid fools. It's just, that's, you know, they're just out there full of energy and looking for what they can do in the world. And I say this as somebody who feels like I didn't have proper guidance during those ages, and not maybe it was around, maybe people were trying to give me guidance and I didn't listen to them, but I kind of feel like I've gotten to where I'm at because I didn't have like a mentor. So please be somebody else's mentor.
But as the journalist sadly recognizes, this is an uphill fight. It's simply impossible to reason with those who say that the young people of today are the worst ever. It's totally unproductive to even try to change their minds, right? Like the journalist here is very solemnly wondering if there's even a point to writing this article. But despite their pessimism, the journalist does find solace in one possible scenario. Perhaps a century after its publication, someone might find this article by pure happenstance and quote it to the dismay of the complaining old folks of the year 2025. So maybe
Hell yeah, brother.
These lines won't be quite so futile after all. Thank you for watching.
Give yourself a pat on the back, Dime Store Adventures. That was an amazing ending to your video. Yeah, well, Well, as that wraps up, that was Dime Stores Adventures. Please give his video a watch if you haven't already. And if you can, before you leave here, like and subscribe to my videos. And if you want to see more from me, there's a playlist that's going to be linked right next to my head here in just a second. Besides that, all I have to say is enjoy yourself.